Good evening. Lovely to be with each of you. A couple of quick announcements. Please sign up for our upcoming February retreat, February 2nd through the 4th. That's next weekend. So really looking forward to having you. And so please come to that if you can. Secondly, I have a retreat planned April 25th through the 28th in San Diego. And it will be open to 20 people, and it'll book up really quickly. And so if you're interested in that, get a hold of me and I'll send you some details. Okay. This is the big announcements. And I can't find a way to stress this enough. Just the importance of retreat, the power of retreat, the transmission that comes through on retreat. And when I was young and on the path, I lived for retreats. I just couldn't wait for the next retreat. And retreats were difficult. And retreats for me, when I was with my teacher and working for him, were a lot of work, like a tremendous amount of work, because I had to do all the logistical stuff and help everyone out. But it was just this time when I felt that I was fully plugged into God, fully plugged into grace, fully plugged into the most glorious thing and there was, the only thing that was worth living for. And so, I'm a big fan of retreats, but I've been hearing this message often. I was walking down the street the other day, me and my two buddies, Doodles and Buster, and I heard this voice come into me. It's basically God's voice. And he said, Craig, like, you're not a very good fisher. And I was like, what is God saying here? It's like, I've always hated fishing because I never wanted to kill anything as a kid. And I never wanted to disturb anyone. I never wanted to put anything on anyone. I never wanted to inconvenience anyone. And then, I was just reflecting. I was like, what am I hearing? You're not a very good fisher, Craig. And then I heard this quote, from the Bible about, Jesus, making, Simon and Andrew and, whoever, John and whoever, fishers of men. And it's just something I've lacked, is this ability to be a fisher of men. I don't want to be a fisherman, but I will tell you that retreat is like the pinnacle, the prime spiritual opportunity to open, to awaken, to shift into a massively different world. And so that's about the best sales pitch I could give. And I don't want anyone ever to think I'm selling them anything, because I don't like selling things. We can't sell God, but, in a sense, like, we have an opportunity to come together in a deep way. And retreats cost a lot of money. Like, a lot of times when I do in-person retreats, sometimes I only make the cost of the retreat. Like, I don't even make anything. Sometimes I'll make a little bit for my travel expenses, but they're hard and they're difficult for me, as a teacher. They're difficult for us as students. But at some point on the spiritual path, difficulty becomes irrelevant. And at some point, and please, no one take this the wrong way, like, money becomes irrelevant. It's like Jesus looked at these individuals, said, hey, come with me. I want to show you something great. And these guys were like, well, we got our life, we got our fishing boats, we got our nets, like, we got our, it's an enormously expensive ordeal, the spiritual path. But the payoff, I can tell you, it's not going to be in $1 million. The payoff is in the direct experience of your life, the direct experience of your consciousness. And so if you're on the fence, the weekend retreats, just the online retreats, are a great place to start. And, if you're ever needing a scholarship to any online events, I'm always happy to give those out. The in-person events, I can't because the cost is so high. It's just like, it's hard for me to give away something that I can't afford myself. so anyways, but please come to the online retreat, and that's February 2nd through the 4th. And if you really want to come together in person, I know a lot of you asked for this. Come. And retreats they're a little bit silly here in the United States. They're like very, they're like an expensive spiritual vacation. But again, we're stepping into a new world, a new reality. And then eventually, the idea is we want that thing to become permanent. And so I'd like to start today with this question, the question that Jennifer brought forward. And it's a beautiful question, a beautiful question. And the question goes something like this. Hi, Craig, in regards to enlightenment, I sometimes feel like people see enlightenment as the end goal of the journey, not the continued process of the journey. Like they're going to wake up one day enlightened, and then their life will be a certain way. I feel like if you are walking down a path towards enlightenment, then you are enlightened. But then I think there are many levels to enlightenment. Yes. Could you speak about your journey and some of the different levels of learning, growing, and exploring that you experienced? And now that you are on the enlightened level you are on, what does that mean to you, and what do you do to keep growing, learning, and exploring? Okay. And so I think it's important, right from the beginning, just to be clear what enlightenment is. In fact, I don't like the word enlightenment. I love it, and also I hate it. It's a terrible word because, like one great Buddhist said this to me. I can't remember which one, but they said, enlightenment is really, more like a verb, than an adjective or a noun. It's a verb in that it's an ongoing thing. And when you're in it, of course, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. But for most people, enlightenment is not just this one doorway they walk through. And then that's it. I'm good. I'm done. I'm cooked. It's over. But let's speak about this question with some great nuance here. Some great nuance. So the fundamental mistake that most everyone makes, and I say this, I think, almost every week, is they think that enlightenment is one, an experience, and two, a feeling. But enlightenment is this recognition that you are awake awareness. That you are awake awareness. You are not your thoughts, and you're not your emotional nature. Your thoughts arise within this presence that is awake, that is aware. And if we all, like right now, feel, so if we just take a moment and step out of our identity, our identification with personality, our identification with thoughts, or identification with being a student, or identification with being, mother, father, sister, brother. And we just take a moment here just to close our eyes and to feel and to experience the essence of what we are, the presence that we are. And so beyond any age, beyond any name, beyond any form, you solely feel that which is alive. You will begin to notice that this aliveness is expansive. Like the aliveness that you are, if you feel right now, if you experience directly, the aliveness that you are, it doesn't actually stop at the edges of your skull, doesn't stop at the edges of your brain, doesn't stop at the edges of the skin of your body. The aliveness that you are. I want you to notice, like if you feel the aliveness that you are, for example, in your feet. And you may notice the floor beneath you. But if you allow awareness to expand, if you just feel into the aliveness that you are in your feet, you'll notice it descends down into the earth. So right here with this simple exercise, we can begin to see, oh, this thing that I am is bigger than this body. If we come into our heart, I want you to see if you can notice, experience the aliveness of your heart beyond the edges of your chest. Maybe you can feel out 3 feet or 6 feet, 12 feet or 24. You can feel the aliveness that you are throughout the expanse of your home. And if you notice, this aliveness is totally unconditioned. Now we can go into our mind and start thinking about memories and feeling into trauma in the body. We can get into conditioned aspects of our being. But as far as this experience of enlightenment, we're giving ourselves permission to get to know the unconditioned aspect of our being. The part of you that was the same as you were when you were 6 years old, 12 years old, 18 years old. There was just something, there is something that's fundamental and alive and awake and vast and good and whole and complete. And if we could all imagine going outside right now, looking up at the moon, the Milky Way galaxy, and if we sit there just with an open mind, you'll start to notice your consciousness filling the sky, communing with the stars. And so let's all just feel into that. Like, how does that feel? And if we're good Buddhists, we might call this our unborn nature. If we're good Christians, we might call this Christ consciousness. And if we're good non-dual people, the question is can we rest here? And just be this without picking up that egoic identification and just beginning to notice that everything everything is completely okay just as it is. As we allow ourselves to be the hugeness of the sky, the hugeness of the love in our heart. We start to acknowledge that everything is already okay. Everything is beautiful and good as it is. That there is no problem. Now, if any of you are thinking in your mind, I can think of a problem. I can think of lots of problems. Well, then we're not in a space of enlightenment. We're in a space of our egoic identity. And that's not wrong. That's not bad. It's just a different space. And so let's all come down into our egoic mind and just think of whatever problem you have in life. I wish I could go to a retreat, but I can't afford it. It costs too much. I wish my boyfriend, girlfriend, partner was different. I wish there was no war and violence here on planet Earth. I wish my dog would live forever. It's like, as soon as you come down into your human thinking mind, if we identify with the individual that's here, our experience becomes conditioned, conditional. I will be happy if my friend Doodles lives with me forever. I'll be happy if my wife is always kind to me. I'll be happy if I'm always right and win at everything in life. I'll be happy if I never have to sit in traffic. And so we just see that there's these two worlds we can live in. And so like just a half hour ago, I normally have a little bit of a rest before I come and I teach. I just sat in a space of non-dual unity. I just lay down in bed and there's nothing for me to do. There's no one for me to be. And I just rest in this place of radiant peace and love. And the beautiful thing about being awake, I'll just say quote unquote awake, is that this recognition is here all the time. That there's immense love here, there's immense peace here, whether my human self is having a good day or a bad day. In the background, in the foreground, there is peace. Sometimes in the foreground, there is peace and spaciousness and some real difficult, horrific event. Like the other night, I was out walking with my four-legged friends. And then pretty soon I found myself in a herd of four-legged friends. And I found myself in a herd of deer. And, in the herd, there was one little guy. I think maybe it was a little gal. And she was limping. And she had a broken leg. And it was really broken. And I felt the hugeness of the sky. I felt this immense love in my heart. And there was also just this human part of me that was looking at this young doe that was just hopping along with the pack. And her mama, like right now we have a couple feet of snow in Durango, and her mama went and broke off some branches and kind of walked it over to her. God, it's going to cause me to cry. It's heartbreaking. Walked, over to her with a couple branches and like fed her. And what I saw, in this this little doe is like the mama cared so much. So much. And this doe was the runt. I don't know if she was the runt to begin with, but she was the runt now, because she only has 3 legs and hopping along. And the mama was trying, to feed her, to keep her alive. And I knew like this, this deer, she was a dead girl walking. It's like we're in winter here in Colorado. It is cold. There's lots of snow. And this poor girl's, has 3 legs. It's just like, so she's either going to starve or get eaten by coyotes or mountain lion. I even had the thought, it would be decent of me, to get out my bow and help her swiftly end her life. But then that thought broke my heart. So just the fact that we live in a world of birth and death, that there's some beings that don't make it, for very long. And that we have to kill to live. Like all these things just started hurting my human heart. And this is what it's like to be an individual. And that's why the Buddha said, like, in a sense, what was the Buddha's first teaching? Life is dukkha, life is suffering. But when we identify with our human self, there's so much pain here. And there's so many whys, and I wish it was different. And there's this hurting and this aching. But when we come into our non-dual self, this timeless, eternal presence, there's this deeper level of acceptance. As we step more fully into the mind of God, and we don't identify so much with the individual deer, we more identify as life itself. Just knowing and trusting that it's okay if this deer dies. She'll be born again, perhaps a higher life form. She'll be food for the mountain lion or for the coyote or food for the earth. Eventually, all of us become food for the earth. And so this question of like, well, what is enlightenment? What is it? In one sense, it means to live from the mind of God, to live from the vast view, not the individual view. And again, I want to be crystal clear here. There's nothing wrong with the individual view. In fact, God made us, had us incarnate into this wild paradox where we are literally this vast presence. And yet simultaneously, we're in a body that will grow and evolve, that will experience triumphs and failures and defeat. And we're given an ego, and within our ego, we have all these programs. And in the most basic sense, almost every program can be reduced to fight or flight. The pleasure principle. I want to experience what feels good, and I don't want to experience what feels bad. And how this tends to manifest on the spiritual path is oftentimes our egoic nature gets a hold of an idea of enlightenment as one day I'm going to get to a place where everything goes my way. And that's what the ego is always telling us. Like if we were on YouTube and those pesky ads that come up in the beginning of videos, those pesky ads, often they are I love it when it's some guy who doesn't look like he can afford a house. And, somehow he goes and he does a tour of a big mansion and he gives you the video of like, hey, everyone, you want to be rich like me? I'm going to tell you about my multi-level marketing scheme or whatever. He's just trying to hook us into get rich just like me. And a lot of times we think of enlightenment as like this. I want to get to a place where I never suffer again. I never feel pain. Where, like Jennifer writes, where we want to wake up one day enlightened and then their life will be a certain way. It'll be like everything will be perfect. And that's how almost everyone chases after enlightenment. And if we chase after enlightenment as some goal, where we think we're going to get something, we're going to feel something, that everything's going to fall into place. And I'm going to tell you, like, that's not what happens. My life often is a disaster. Often it is a disaster. My perspective is a perspective of freedom amidst disaster. In fact, like in my workday, people come to me and they tell me about their disasters. Maybe some of you have come and said, let me tell you about my latest disaster. Let me tell you about the tragedy that has struck my life. And for me, I was always curious about this. I was curious how to walk here on planet Earth with a heart that is merged with God, and yet a willingness to be here fully, to grow, to evolve. And again, most people teach, let's just get to a place where we are merged with God. In fact, a lot of my colleagues teach in this way. Let's just wake up, forget about everything else. Let's just do that. That's a good plan. That's the plan of the monk, and that's what most monks and spiritual traditions teach at their core. Is like, let's get to heaven. And for me, like, I never liked that approach. It seemed really selfish and seemed really egotistical. It just wasn't my nature. I wanted to know God. And I wanted to share this divinity, to share in communion with others, to experience this divinity, and allow this divinity to flow through me in my relationship with my children, or my partner, my mother, father, whoever, with you, with my dogs. For many of us, we can pull this off with our dogs. They're the easiest ones. They're the easiest ones. But then I found out, there's this real problem in this view of simply wanting to feel a certain way. In fact, I can tell you that when I first woke up, I felt a certain way, and it felt quite incredible. Quite incredible. It felt as if I was condensed in the smallest, teeniest, most claustrophobic prison for the entirety of my life. And then one day, and many of you have heard this story, but I'll make it quick. A great tragedy came to me. And I did this funny thing is I lost the ability. I can't even say I did it. I'd like to say I stopped resisting. But what happened in my ego psychology was my ego psychology found that I could not resist my experience. It was just too terrible what was happening. And I couldn't control it. I couldn't resist it. I couldn't keep it together. And something in the ego psychology broke. And as soon as it broke, and again, just to be clear, what broke was Craig controlling life, Craig resisting life, Craig wanting life to be a certain way, Craig trying to make his life be a certain way. And through a series of very stressful events, that aspect of my ego was shattered. It was just utter defeat. It was not a beautiful moment of meditation like I had planned. It was utter defeat. Utter defeat. Utter defeat. And within that space of defeat, something miraculous happened. My sense of self was liberated from this ego psychology that's trying to control, do, force, manipulate, micromanage, be self-conscious, all that kind of stuff. It just broke. And then all of a sudden, my sense of self went from feeling absolutely claustrophobic, stuck in this body and this mind and this personality called Craig, to immediately feeling as if I was as big as the sky. And, from like a mental health perspective, this was quite bizarre. If you saw me that day, my hair is normally pretty messy, but my hair is in every direction. I had like dried mucus and tears all over my face. I'd sweat through my clothes. Like my eyes were bloodshot from crying so much. I look like a lunatic. And I'll tell you, I felt like a lunatic. I felt as if not only was I on the moon, but that I was the moon, that I was the whole universe. And I just made this very small decision in that moment. Very small, but pretty radical decision of I don't want to go back in that little personality. I don't want to go back in there. I don't want to go back in there. I don't want to go back and be stuck in that personality, in that small body. And since that moment in history, I've done a pretty good job. Pretty good. I think that's the best any of us can do, is a pretty good job of staying out of it for the most part. But then here comes this great paradox. That there is a body here. There is a personality here. There is a soul here that is evolving. That will always be evolving. This one will be evolving for the extent of this lifetime, but the soul continues throughout, multiple lifetimes. And I don't want to get too much in that right now, but so then Jennifer asks, well, how does this relate? Like, how does this experience of being this vast, awake, aware presence relate to being human and having a body? And it relates very much the same way I relate to each of you. If you've ever met with me in a session, I speak to the human character, Craig. I offer the same teaching to the human character, Craig. Like, in fact, like I'm speaking to myself every time I'm speaking to you. As I'm teaching this body and this mind, hey man, relax, breathe, trust, open. Like I had long COVID for 2 years, and I think like 2 years and 4 months before finally, like I'm finally feeling better. And I like had this massive breakthrough with it. But I talked to my body the last 2 years and 4 months. It was that this too shall pass. This too shall pass. Like tomorrow is going to be another day. And I sat with it and I opened to the pain, the difficulty, the shortness of breath, the hell of all that experience that I just went through. And it was terrible. It was terrible. This body had thoughts during the last 2 years of ending this life because there was such pain in this body. And yet at the same time, this consciousness was free. And it's a very bizarre thing. A very bizarre thing to have a consciousness that's free and to have an evolutionary body. And so how did I speak to my body? What is my growing edge? My growing edge is the same as your growing edge. My human experience is the same as your human experience. If I trip and I fall and I stub my toe, or if I bonk my nose, or if I get sick, my body hurts and it aches. The beautiful thing about enlightenment or about awakening, like I like that word awakening. We are waking up and recognizing that our consciousness, our essence, our presence is something different than the body and the personality and the human individual experience of self. And when we recognize this, we always have the choice. We have the choice in every moment to fully identify with the human. Like earlier today, I got in a little tiff with my wife, and I was like, geez, what is she doing? What is she thinking? But also I know, come on, do you really want to be small? No, I don't want to be small. I'm not small. I'm not small. I am big. And because I'm big, I can forgive. Because I'm big, I can let go. Because I'm big, I can see through this personal view and see that this personal view will lead to suffering and division. I told you a couple of weeks ago, there was a personal view that arose in my consciousness. Who is this person parking in front of my house? How dare they? How dare they? And so I talk to that part of me, and I meet it with love and with kindness. I meet it with understanding and compassion. And the human character, Craig, he's got a lot of work to do. He's got a lot to learn. He's got a big evolving edge. He has all kinds of issues. And if you ever meet a human being who acts like they made it somewhere where they no longer have issues, you should be very suspicious, very cautious. Now, I can say this for certainty. If any of us step into that which is awake and that which is aware, to your non-dual, unconditioned nature, you will find that what you are, this essence that you are, has no issues. Zero, zilch. That you are absolutely perfect just as you are. But if you reflect for half a second on your human nature, your human condition, your human ego psychology, I hope you can very quickly see, oh, yeah, there's all kinds of issues here. And in this lineage that we're in, we don't see these issues as a problem. We see it, in a sense, scientifically. We just see that this body is an evolutionary body, and it has a growing edge because it is the evolving edge of God. It's the evolving edge of the human species. All of our bodies, all of our human egoic consciousness is the evolving edge. And we are here to support that with love, with strength, with discipline, with compassion, with forgiveness, with acceptance. We do anything and everything we can to help this body, mind, this personality self to grow into alignment. We wanted this thing, this machine, to come into a greater alignment with our divinity. There's a beautiful thing that happens when your human sense of self starts to fall in love with God, starts to fall in love with truth, starts to fall out of love with the fight or flight, kind of consciousness. The human self, it starts to merge into the enlightened self. And then what that's felt like practically is it's just a lot more easy to be enlightened. It's a lot more easy to be free because there's no internal turmoil. But also, I want to be clear here. There's a different school of thought with enlightenment, a different perspective within enlightenment. It's absolutely fine if there's turmoil here, because there's a human here. And I forgive the human for being human. In Zen, it's said like really eloquently, enlightenment is having no anxiety about being human, even if anxiety is present. No anxiety about having anxiety. And as you feel into that, you start to see, oh, there's a lot more space here to grow. To grow. And just to be as you are and to grow. But there's not a demand that growth happens. But simultaneously, from a different perspective, there's a massive demand that growth happens. Because part of waking up to your non-dual self is this recognition that always, everything is always perfect just as it is. And everything is ultimately awake in this moment right now, fully and completely. That nothing needs to be done. There's nowhere, no one to be, nowhere to go, nothing to do. And a different experience of enlightenment is I am the evolving edge of God. And God is the absolute, perfected, empty nothingness. And God is the ever-evolving, manifest. And I am that. I am evolution itself. And so, for me, like one of those questions, like in regards to, well, what is enlightenment? There's the typical non-dual fundamentalist view. It's just enlightenment is just being vast, spacious emptiness. But isn't it not just equally true that enlightenment is the recognition that you are evolution itself? You are God eternally being born into matter, into form. That you are nothing and you are everything. And then you are everything evolving. And then let's have some fun here. And you are unconditional love. You are unconditional strength. And we're here to discover all these qualities through being challenged. Through being challenged. Yesterday, my wife competed in a jiu-jitsu tournament. And everyone kept asking me, Craig, like, are you competing? Are you competing? All these young bucks kept asking me. I was like, no, I'm not competing. That's not my evolving edge. But my wife, like it was her evolving edge to compete. And she's, like one of the newest members of the gym. And she came in, and she's a white belt, and they didn't have any white belts for her to compete with. So she had to compete in the blue belt category. And she won first place, in the gi category and the no gi. So basically she won in 2 different tournaments. And like when I sit back and look at her, I see there is just something in her that wants to grow and expand in her realm of strength. Grow and expand in a sense of fearlessness. And to me, like, that is such a beautiful thing. Like, that is her evolving edge. And very easily, like if we were a non-dual fundamentalist, we would say, oh, she's just wanting that because she's lacking something in her ego psychology and she needs that recognition. It's like, we could play that card if we wanted. And that may be true for some people. I saw that there were some individuals there that was the truth. I saw, there was an individual there trying to impress his father. I saw there was other individuals with anger issues that were working it out. That were working it out on the mat. Like, we live in this evolutionary world. We also live in an absolute world. And for me, my question was always both. I recognized the absolute first. But what I found with the absolute is it didn't really do much for my life. In fact, in an escapist way, it made my life much better because I could always just be this vast, spacious emptiness and everything was okay. But in an evolving edge sense, it actually made my life worse because, in a sense, I gave up on life. I stopped doing. Next thing you know, I was, like the landlord was knocking on the door, like, hey, where's the money? Like, where's the money? The children were like, hey, Dad, where are you at? Are you home? Are you with me? And so for me, the question became, how do I be awake in the world, in the family, as a father? And if anyone is a parent, you will know, like, being a parent is a job of failing again and again and again and again. So no one gets some worldview that Craig's some enlightened parent or anything like that. They don't get that worldview because that's not the truth. The truth is, like, when this absolute wakes up in you and when this absolute turns and starts to walk in the direction of life, there's no longer fear of failing at life. There's no longer fear about trying something new. There's no longer fear about guarding the ego, like, oh, I need to guard my ego. And I have to present some aspect of myself to the world or people won't love you. No, I mean, there's times when my kids tell me, hey, Dad, you screwed that up. And I'll stop and I'll look from the perspective of the absolute. I'll say, you're right. I screwed that up. Like, I screwed that up. I dropped the ball. I dropped the ball. But there's not judgment of myself. I'm not feeling guilty. I realize I dropped the ball. I say, okay, well, what is the most intelligent way to pick this up? And often I will call forth the grace of God to come into me, to lead me, to show me, to speak to this idiot that's here, that's gotten confused, that's lost his way, and show me how to live in a greater way. And so this is one of those other things that people think with enlightenment. I thought this when I was young, that enlightenment meant that you knew everything. And a lot of times enlightenment means you recognize how much you do not know. How much you do not know. But with this comes a grand humility. A humility to be able to listen and to be able to receive a greater truth. And a truth, and this is what's very important here, a truth that is not conditioned. That's not conditioned. Like a lot of times, well, I'll just say this, like I was at Mass this morning, and at Mass, guys, got up and he spoke. He said, "Hey, everyone, we're going to meet at the library this week, and we're going to have a talk about science and God and how these two work together." It's like sometimes our mind is conditioned to be scientific. And the reason we cannot know God is because we have too much science, in our brain. We have too much skepticism in our brain. We have just too much mental activity. We're not in our heart. Because our heart is where we are going to experience enlightenment. It's where we are going to experience God, where we're going to experience truth. Whereas the scientist grasps at truth in the mind. Anytime you grasp at truth in the mind, you'll always find that truth is insecure. This is why people online, like with their politics, they have to hold on to their politics so tightly because there's so much damn insecurity there. Whereas when you're humble and you don't need, like, I don't need the truth to be conditioned through Harvard. Like, I don't care if mindfulness has studies behind it that says it works. To me, it's just like, wow, like, I certainly don't need that. I don't need a scientist to tell me that God is real. I need an open heart. In fact, my little girl, she was really messing with me a little bit ago. So her and my wife, my wife's trying to be formally baptized, like within the Catholic Church. And so they're having to like study religion, and they're, having to play with like questions of what is God. And there's like a workbook that they do, through the Catholic tradition. And, my daughter started just like throwing out all these questions. She's like, "Dad, how does Jesus fly up to heaven? How does Jesus speak to me? How does Jesus do this? What is Pontius Pilate? Like, what is that?" She's just like just throwing all these questions at me. And she was giggling and she was messing with me. And she was actually looking for her daddy to give her a rational answer. Like, this is how it is. And I just looked at her and I said, "Look, sweetie, the only way we know God, the only way, is through opening our hearts and experiencing her directly, experiencing him directly, experiencing that directly. This is how we know God. This is how we know truth. This is how we know freedom." And if I just take a moment and look at this question again, make sure, I've answered it clearly. The last part of the question says, "Craig, what does it mean to you? What do you do to keep growing and learning and exploring?" In the beginning, I was growing, learning, and exploring because I was in so much pain. I felt as if I was in a prison cell, and I was growing and learning and exploring because I knew I was in prison. I just knew it. Like, ever since I was a kid, I was like, I know I'm in prison, because I used to do this thing. I'd go outside at night and I'd step out of the prison. I'd just be the bigness of the sky. And then, as I was walking back in the house, I'd look at my dad and I'd have a little bit of fear. And then I'd like come back into my body. And I'd be like, oh, now I'm in my body. And I need to, outgrow this body. I need to expand out of the body, because it was painful. Now I like to think of growth as a natural state of divinity. It's just a natural movement of the heart. It's a natural movement of your consciousness is to always want to expand. Like the fabric of consciousness is expansive. And so any time in life that I find a limitation, the question becomes is, can I be awake here? Can I help to free and liberate this limitation? And like really, when we wake up, when we really start to wake up, we begin to realize, oh, this isn't like awakening is not get out of jail free card. It's not I get to be in my own private bliss world. It's I become a light that wants to shine into darkness, a light that wants to light anywhere that's not lit up. And so then you see that we become this movement that lights up the world, that lights up darkness, that lights up pain, that meets it with love. That meets it with kindness, that looks for things to forgive, for things to let go of, that walks in the direction of pain, that walks in the direction of limitation, and that brings this consciousness into reality. And so one of the things I found myself doing, in Zen, that there's this teaching, they call it like dying before you die. But this other night, like when I saw this deer, I want to call it a three-legged deer. It really had four legs, but one was broken, but it's hobbling along on its three legs. And I felt into its heart. And I began to grieve for it. I felt into the heart of the mama deer. I began to grieve for her. And I felt into the suffering of this world. And I just started weeping. I just started weeping. It just started weeping. And as you see me, it looks a little bit crazy, but there's this wonderful thing that happens through grieving. We liberate pain. Through grieving, we liberate this world. Through keeping our eyes open and seeing the truth and holding a space of love and being intimate with all of life and being fearlessly open through not turning away. And this is really what enlightenment is about, is not turning away. I would love to teach that enlightenment is just a feeling of vast expansiveness. It is. But in a lived sense, it's a willingness not to turn away, rather to turn toward, to turn toward. And this is what our world needs right now, is individuals who will turn toward, who will look at their experience, who will look at this world with open eyes and an open heart. A closed heart will say, you hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you back. That's what a closed heart says. A defended heart, a fearful heart says, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back. You cut me off, I'm going to cut you off. An open heart says, you hurt me. Oh, I understand why you hurt me. Because I too am human and I have hurt others. You cheated me. Oh, I understand why you cheated me. You preyed upon me. Oh, I understand why and how you preyed upon me. Because I've preyed upon others. And then it's that choice to respond with love, to try something new, to try something different than whatever our habitual conditioned nature is. And from this place, we find that life becomes quite alive. Quite alive. Quite a challenge. Quite a drama. And when I sat in Mass today, we in the Catholic Church, we have this thing called the Stations of the Cross. And so I just looked up and I saw it was like whatever the station was. There's 12 stations. It says, Jesus fell down the third time. And the next station was, and Jesus was stripped of his garments. And that's really the question here on planet Earth. It's not how can we get to some place where we no longer feel, which is like the life of a psychopath, by the way. To a place where we no longer feel emotion. That's what a lot of people think enlightenment is. But how will we respond? How do we respond with love, with clarity, with wisdom, with depth, with humility, with forgiveness when we were knocked down the third time that day? How will we respond? When someone steals our jacket. I don't think any of us are going to be stripped of our clothes and dragged through the streets, but it's possible if we live in a terrible place in the world. And it's possible, if I reflect a little more deeply, it's possible for that to happen too. And there is assault. There is assault. It's like, how do we respond? How do we respond? And sometimes the most enlightened response is to fight. And sometimes the most enlightened response is to forgive. And sometimes the most enlightened response is to fight and to be angry and then to be sad and then to forgive. Because that's really what it means to be human. And that's what it means to grow. And many of us need to make those steps. So anyways, beautiful question. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I hope there was something in there for each of you. Okay. There's another question that was sent in. It's kind of similar. Hi, Craig. I've been experiencing these moments of extreme love for everyone and everything around me. as well as feelings of unity within this. And then, this is the fun part, this is followed by extreme moments of pain. The pain isn't always specific to me. It almost feels like the pain of the world. I'm currently feeling very confused about what specifically is happening to me and how to cope with these feelings. Yeah. In a sense, this is really what I was speaking about with me seeing that fawn who got hit by a car. Almost every question that people ask me comes through the projection of, I don't want to feel pain. Or pain is bad. If I feel pain, there's something wrong. Aren't we supposed to just not feel pain ever again? Isn't that what enlightenment is? No. And of course, I spoke about that in great detail a moment ago. But when our heart opens, for some of us, when our heart opens, at first, when our heart opens, often we feel immense bliss, spaciousness, freedom, unity. And we're like, I got it. I'm enlightened. I did it right. I get the gold star. Like yesterday, my wife, she got 2 gold medals. Like she did it. She was the champion, like she was the boss. Like she pulled it off. It's like, that's awesome. You get the gold star for the day. We've been walking around, I've been telling her all day, we're all so proud of you. You're the champion. What an honor it is to live in the household with the champion. And, we have this idea. I have to be careful not to get lost here. We have this idea. Again, it's just an ego idea. Are we trying to get to a place where we no longer feel pain? And what true enlightenment is from a heart sense, is a total willingness to be with and to feel everything. And so whoever wrote this question, I didn't copy the name, but it sounds like you're feeling everything. And the mind says, well, I'm very confused about what specifically is happening to me and how to cope with these feelings. Do we need to cope with these feelings? Like if we're coping with feelings, that means we're resisting. What if we just felt everything? Like often in spirituality and spiritual awakening, there's this word called naked, that we use it naked. It's like our naked experience. That's when we experience something directly. Like, yesterday, I think it was yesterday, maybe it was the day before, I saw that poor deer. And I experienced it nakedly. I just allowed it fully. Of course, there was a human part of me. That's like, gosh, it would be great if we lived in a world where, where creatures didn't suffer. But that's not the world we live in. We live in a world where there's birth, there's death, there's disease, there's sickness, there's old age, there's heartache, there's suffering in this world. But can we live in a way where we allow our heart to open and we fully feel what's there? When we fully feel what's there, often we will be moved to tears. Maybe once a day, sometimes a couple times a day. If you're just having a day where there's no suffering at all, no tears, but maybe feel the pain of the world. I mean, my God, there's massive wars going on, massive suffering. I mean, there's people in cobalt mines and in the Congo right now with a baby on their back, digging so we can all get an electric car, like digging for, lithium or however that works, so we can have an electric car. If we think about that, if we feel into their experience, of course, we're going to grieve. We should grieve. This is a crazy world. I once, I've been to a lot of mass graves. It's a crazy thing to say out loud, but it's true. I've been into mass graves in Guatemala, Nicaragua. Let me think about this. Like Honduras, like down there in Central America. I've been in mass graves in, like Normandy in France and at the Battle of the Somme, on the border of France and Germany. And when you come into contact just like with the rawness of life, you are going to grieve. You have to grieve, but there's no coping that's needed. You open your heart and you let yourself cry, because there's no coping that can be done. We can't explain war away and violence away. You sit at a site and there's 30 people buried, 150 people. I was at one grave and I swore it said there was 10,000 just bodies that were just like bulldozed into just like this thing. It was just like remains of soldiers. They don't even know who they were. Some of them were Germans, some of them were French, some of them were Americans. It's just like some of them were Brits. Some Guatemalans. It's just like, oh my God, these poor people. When you come into contact with that, with an open heart, you should cry. You should grieve. You should grieve profusely. And so, I'm currently feeling very confused about what specifically is happening. Your heart is awakening. And as it awakens, you feel everything. When you're one with everything, you're one with everything. The goodness, the beauty, the divinity, the hugeness. We're also one with the fact that we live in a world where people shoot each other. And sometimes a lot of people get shot in one moment, in one day. But there is this freedom, and this can sound a little bit crazy, so I have to be careful about how to say it. Like when I stood, in the farm fields, right now, the farm fields where the Battle of the Somme took place. There's these beautiful rolling farm fields. Actually reminded me a lot of Kentucky, where I grew up as a kid. Just like rolling pastures, just like so beautiful, these beautiful hills. And you see the absolute beauty. And you see and you experience the hugeness of the sky. You feel the radiance, the strength, the aliveness of the earth. And you experience the totality of that. And the great question is, can you continue to be open and also experience the horror of life? There's this wonderful thing that happens when we can be this open and we don't shut down. We don't listen to our ego that says this is too much. And that is true, by the way. It is too much for our ego psychology to comprehend. But it's not too much for the immensity of your heart. And if you make the choice not to cope, not to strategize, not to be confused by your mind, but simply to be open and to stay open, you'll find that this massive unifying love will begin to move through you. And will be able to respond to life from this otherworldly place. A place of absolute love, absolute fearlessness, of absolute connection. Of absolute connection. And this is why, a man once upon a time was nailed to a cross. And he could look out at the people who nailed him to the cross, say, "Forgive them, Lord." Forgive them, Lord. Because Jesus was connected to the Christ. He lived as the Christ. He loved as the Christ. The Christ moved through him despite the suffering of his body. And that's one of the great things that begins to happen. With enlightenment, this is something I didn't speak about in the beginning, but that this greater force begins to take you over and live through you, act through you, love through you, respond through you. And often, like my teacher taught, he used to say this thing, despite you, Craig, like despite you, like the truth is waking up. The love is waking up. Despite you, Craig. And I love that. I love that because in that was the recognition that Craig, the character, could resist. Craig, the character, could sabotage. Craig, the character, could try to screw it up. But the truth was stronger. And so a lot of times, like Craig tried to push God out of the way and do it Craig's way. But then a lot of the times, like after a period, it's like God's like, nope, I'm not going to allow for that. I'm pushing that which is little out of the way to allow for something greater. And to me, like this is one of the greatest gifts of being free, is that ultimately we begin to see that God is the doer. That God is doing it all. God's always done it all. Despite us. And I always took like great comfort in that. It always kind of like made me just smile. Made me smile. And with this comes the recognition, this kind of a faith recognition, that the light will always outshine the darkness, the truth will always triumph, that love will always prevail. Sometimes it might take a couple thousand years. It might take a couple thousand years. Look at the Middle East and I'm like, dang, they might need some more time. They might need some more time. If I look at our governments and our military industrial complex, it's like, oh, those boys might need a little bit more time, a little bit more time before they're ready to let go of their false power and that silly chase after money and all that kind of thing. So anyways, all right, I'm going to do one question then. We'll call it a night. Let's hear from Kyle. Hey, Kyle, are you here?
Hey, good evening. You guys hear me?
Yeah, good to see you, Kyle.
Good to see you too. I feel that I might be efforting a little bit too much, but I want to like double check and make sure that could be or could not be the case.
Yes, you are efforting too much. So how could you well, let's look at it this way. What does that efforting need in order to relax?
Needs to not think about the future.
Needs to not think about the future. So if you understand the efforting from a place of compassion, why is it looking at the future? Like what's in the future?
Financial stability.
Financial stability. Oh, this is good. This is good. This is a little different than I thought. So financial stability. Okay. Like, do you have financial stability right now?
I mean, technically, yeah, but I'm like working a job I don't like that much. So I don't think I could do that more than 4 or 5 years.
Okay. I'm working a job I can't do that much, and I can only do it for about 4 or 5 years. So you good for the next 4 years?
Am I good? No, I think I can handle it, but
Are you good financially for the next 4 years?
oh yeah, I mean, I think yes. I mean, I live in an expensive place, but I think
I live in an expensive place. Yes. So, but tell me, like from an absolute place, are you good for the next 4 or 5 years?
oh yeah, I think I'm gonna be good for the rest of my life, but
Okay, so how are you going to know this that I'm going to be good for the rest of my life?
financially, um,
How will you know this? Because this really isn't about finance, is it?
no, I don't think so. I think
Like
ultimately,
what drive Kyle, what drives finance? Like like what's the emotion?
um, safety, the need for safety.
Need for safety. Okay, good. And so like the emotion, like the corresponding like negative emotion will be fear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that fear, what does that gnawing fear need?
Yeah, it needs to be held and made sure that like everything's gonna be okay. It doesn't really matter what job,
Yeah.
brings in
Yeah.
the brings home the bacon, but
Yeah.
there's a part of me that's like, well, I want to bring home the money based off of my true gift, not just
Yeah,
from
yeah.
stuff.
Well, okay. So that I'm going to say is something different. But let's just stay with the fear for a moment. That fear is telling you, I'm scared and I need to be held in a space of love, in a space of safety. Now, safety is an interesting one because safety requires like some level of confidence. And the only way confidence really comes about is through facing fear long term. And so anytime that fear comes up, I'm going to invite you to come into your heart and breathe and feel. In fact, like right now, can we breathe? Can we feel? And there's probably a lot of members of the Sangha. Like I am, struggle with finance. It's just like, so like, let's just breathe and feel in that really human fear around finance and being with it in the most loving way. In the most loving way. And it can be helpful. Like a lot of us, we hold this fear in our jaw, in our throat. And some of us, we hold it in our chest. But ultimately, we hold it in our lower belly. And right down there where that umbilical cord was cut. And so, can we really hold a space of love for that fear? Can we be intimate with that fear? Can we get to know that fear? Like, really get to know it. to feel it and experience it intimately. And so as we move into that, and I ask you, what does fear feel like? So I'm asking you, what does it feel like?
It feels like a grip, most of
Grip.
the time. And
Yeah.
then like when it gets unleashed, it's like intense energy all over the body.
Okay, good. Good. So right now, are you feeling it as a grip, or does it feel like it's unleashed or beginning to unleash itself, or what does it feel like?
Yeah, more like beginning to unleash,
Yeah.
but I can sense a grip there too.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's just continue to feel into that grip and simultaneously feel into that part of it that's unraveling. I'm going to encourage you to get comfortable with that feeling of it unraveling. And I'm going to invite you to see if you can trust in that experience of unraveling. And so right away, you see like your body starts moving and starts flowing, some kundalini's flowing. And I'll just ask you, is there any problem now?
No, it actually feels pretty good.
Actually feels pretty good. And so this is the transmutation of fear. The transmutation of fear. As we start to feel in it, into it, and at first it shows up as a grip, but as you open to it, you start breathing into it, it starts moving, it starts flowing, it starts feeling more like a river. And what you find is like, then it starts to feel, well, you tell me, like, can you feel like a little bit of excitement in it?
Yeah, a lot.
A lot of excitement. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you, if you stay open and you allow this excitement to flow, then you'll be in a state of like open-hearted excitement toward life. But if you go into your mind and start thinking about the future, you can slow this river down and you can help this river to freeze into what we'd call a contraction. And then we could call it, this emotion fear. And so you have this choice. We can open into this river and let the river flow and let it be wild. And in a non-dual sense, we start to experience ourselves as life itself instead of some frozen emotion. And if you look out at reality, Kyle, and say, which one is in alignment with the truth? Is life a frozen block, and I'm going to be squashed and I'm going to be dead? Or is life a wild, exciting, we use the Buddha's word, impermanent ride? Everything is impermanent. Every moment is being born and is dying, and then a new moment is coming, a new moment is coming, a new moment is coming, which is in alignment with the truth of reality.
Yeah, the second one, it feels like a crazy dance.
Yeah. Yeah, crazy, wild, and we call it ecstatic dance. If we're good Buddhists, we'd call this the groundless ground. If we were good yogis, what the yogis call it, something about Brahman. I can't remember. Like Brahman giving birth to Brahman. It's just like just birth, just eternally being born again and again and again and again and again and again. This absolute flow of divinity. And so, in order to be awake, we choose openness. In order to go back to sleep, we choose the future, worrying about the future, thinking about the future. Thinking, how can I put the future in a box and make it static and make it So I'm safe. The truth is, like, there is no safety. But the greater truth is we don't die. Like, we never die. So like, I don't need to worry about safety. Don't need to worry about safety because I don't die. This thing that I am is the river. And this river flows on forever. Forever. And it's given ourselves permission to step into this flow and to see. So like, see if this thing that this guy Craig's saying is true. We've all played long enough the game of the mind that says, I need to control, I need to manipulate, I need to hold on to, I need to attach. And we see the more we do that, the more hooked in and limited our experience becomes. And so, my friend, you play with this, Kyle. There was a second part of your question I don't want to forget, which is I want to share my gift. You'll find that it'll be a lot easier to share your gift as you step into this flow. And you'll find it's a lot harder to share your gift if we're scared and we're nervous and we're contemplating, things like, well, if I share my gift, will the world support me and this and that? And, having this eternal fear about it and everything. Like we can, and, if we're going to be one of those manifestors, I know Tom showed up in the room and he's a big fan of the manifesting thing. It's like, if we're going to manifest, we have to manifest from a place of truly believing. Truly believing. If we try to manifest from fear, what we experience tends to be lack. But when we manifest from this place of flow, things tend to fall into place and they begin to work and things begin to open up. It's not always perfect, exactly like how we planned. Often it's better. It's more wild and dramatic and exciting. It can even become intoxicating when we let go into this flow. But, if we truly want to manifest our gift, we have to face our greatest fears. If we try to manifest without facing our fears, we run into a brick wall. We have to face our fears. Will life support me? Will I die? Will I be homeless? Will it all fall apart? We have to open and see. Open and see, are these fears the truth? Are they the truth of reality? Or is my gift, is this love, is this river the truth of reality? And so anyways, so much love to each of you. Please sign up for the retreat. That's just 2 weekends away. Not this weekend, but next weekend. If you're listening at a later date, it's February 2nd, 2024. And then there's a retreat, an in-person retreat, August 25th through 28th. If you're interested in that, I don't even think I'm going to post it on my website because we'll probably run out of space. It'll be at a big Airbnb house in San Diego, and send me an email if you want to come. I posted a little bit of information about it on Facebook. And I think that's everything. I think that's all I got. So much love to all of you. See y'all soon. Good night, everyone.